The bustling streets of Marrakesh seemed to mock Amira's inner turmoil as she navigated through the crowded marketplace. The vibrant colors of the spice stalls and the melodic calls of merchants created a stark contrast to the gray clouds that hung over her heart. In 3 days, she would become Mrs. Hassan Tazi, wife to one of the most respected businessmen in the community. The match, arranged by her parents, promised security and stability. Everything a young woman should want, according to tradition. The weight of her mother's antique jewelry pressed against her neck as she walked, each step bringing her closer to a future she hadn't chosen. Hassan was kind, educated, and well-established. Any other woman would be overjoyed at such a match. Yet Amira couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a beautifully decorated prison, its bars made of social expectations and family obligations. "Careful with those shawls, they're pure silk," a merchant called out as Amira absent-mindedly brushed past his stall. The fabric whispered against her skin, as soft as the dreams she was being forced to abandon. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Marriage isn't about love, Habibti. It's about building a future, about honor and responsibility." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the narrow alleyways of the Medina as Amira made her way to her final dress fitting. Her wedding dress, an expensive creation of French lace and Arabian craftsmanship, waited for her like a beautiful cage. The seamstress's shop was tucked away in one of the quieter corners of the old city, away from the tourist crowds and persistent vendors. Lost in her thoughts, Amira didn't notice the uneven cobblestone beneath her feet. Her ankle twisted and she felt herself falling forward. Time seemed to slow as she braced for impact, but instead of the hard ground, she felt strong hands steadying her. The scent of sandalwood and something indefinably masculine filled her senses. "Are you all right?" The voice was deep, cultured, with an accent that spoke of international education. Amira looked up into eyes that seemed to pierce through every barrier she had carefully constructed around her heart. The man before her emanated an aura of power and authority, his tailored suit incongruous with the traditional setting of the Medina. "I'm fine, thank you," Amira managed to say, trying to step back, but his hands remained on her arms for a moment longer than necessary. The touch sent unexpected shivers through her body. "Karim Aziz," he introduced himself with a slight bow that somehow managed to be both courtly and modern. The name struck a chord of recognition in Amira's mind. Everyone knew of the Aziz family and their vast business empire. "Amira Bahri," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Their eyes met again, and in that moment, something electric passed between them. It was as if the bustling marketplace had fallen away, leaving them in a bubble of charged silence. A group of tourists pushed past them, breaking the spell. Amira stepped back, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this interaction would appear to anyone who knew of her engagement. "I should go. Thank you for your help." "Wait," Karim called after her, but Amira had already merged into the crowd, her heart pounding with an emotion she didn't dare name. She hurried toward the seamstress's shop, trying to forget the intensity of his gaze, the strength of his hands, the way his presence had made her feel more alive in those few moments than she had felt in years. The seamstress clucked disapprovingly at Amira's flushed appearance as she arrived for her fitting. "A bride should be calm and composed," the older woman lectured as she helped Amira into the wedding dress. But as Amira stood before the mirror, all she could see was the reflection of a woman on the verge of making the biggest mistake of her life. That evening, as she sat with her family for dinner, her father spoke proudly of Hassan's latest business success. Her mother beamed with satisfaction at the mention of the upcoming wedding arrangements. Amira pushed her food around her plate, her appetite gone. The chance encounter in the market had shaken loose something inside her, a yearning for more than just security, a desire for passion and real connection. In her room that night, Amira stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. The moon hung low over the ancient walls of Marrakesh, and somewhere out there, she knew, was a man whose eyes had seen straight into her soul, but she was promised to another, bound by duty and tradition. As she prepared for bed, Amira tried to convince herself that the encounter meant nothing, that it was better forgotten. Yet even in her dreams, those penetrating eyes followed her, promising a different kind of life, one filled with passion, adventure, and true love. In his penthouse suite overlooking the city, Karim Aziz stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of untouched water in his hand. The lights of Marrakesh twinkled below like scattered diamonds, but his thoughts remained fixed on the woman he had encountered in the Medina. Amira Bari. The name echoed in his mind like a forgotten melody. "You're brooding again," came a familiar voice from behind him. Sophia, his cousin and closest confidant, settled herself gracefully on one of the modern leather armchairs. Her designer dress and perfectly manicured appearance spoke of the lifestyle they both inhabited, but her eyes held a sharp intelligence that had nothing to do with wealth. "I met someone today," Karim said simply, knowing Sophia would understand. The significance of those words. It had been 5 years since he had shown any interest in a woman, not since Sarah had left his life so suddenly. Sophia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "And?" she prompted, studying his profile with growing concern. She had watched him build walls around his heart, turning all his energy into expanding their family's business empire. The last thing she wanted was to see him hurt again. "She's engaged to be married," he continued, finally turning to face his cousin, "to Hassan Tazi." The name hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Hassan was well known in their circles, a traditionalist who had built his fortune through old money and older connections. "Ah," Sophia breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The Bari girl. I've heard about the match. It's been the talk of certain circles. They say it's a perfect alliance of old families." She paused, watching her cousin carefully. "Karim, whatever you're thinking." "She doesn't love him," Karim interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of certainty. "You should have seen her eyes, Sophia. They were filled with such resignation, such sadness. It reminded me of—" He stopped abruptly, but Sophia knew he was thinking of Sarah, of the shadows that had haunted her eyes in those final days. "You can't save everyone, cousin," Sophia said softly, rising to stand beside him. "Some people choose their cages willingly." But even as she spoke, she recognized the determination settling over Karim's features, a look she had seen before, usually just before he made some bold business move that shocked their conservative business community. Meanwhile, across the city, Amira sat at her vanity, mechanically brushing her long dark hair. The elaborate henna designs on her hands, the first of many bridal preparations, seemed to mock her growing uncertainty. Her phone buzzed with another message from Hassan, probably another polite inquiry about her day or an update about wedding. Preparations. Hassan was everything her parents had promised, successful, respected, stable. Yet in the few hours since her encounter with Karim, all those qualities had begun to feel suffocating rather than reassuring. The memory of those intense eyes, that brief touch, had awakened something in her that she hadn't even known was sleeping. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Habibti," her mother called, entering with a steaming cup of mint tea. "You seem distracted at dinner." Amira watched in the mirror as her mother approached, noticing for the first time the slight worry lines around her eyes. "I'm just tired, Mama," Amira replied, accepting the tea with a grateful smile. "The wedding preparations are overwhelming." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her kaftan with practiced elegance. "I know this isn't the romantic love story you dreamed of as a little girl," she began, her voice gentle. "But love grows, Amira. Your father and I, we're arranged too, I know." Amira finished the familiar story. "And you grew to love each other deeply." She set down her teacup, turning to face her mother. "But what if there's more to life than just growing to love someone? What if there's something that burns brighter? Something that burns out faster?" Her mother interrupted firmly. "Passion fades, Habibti. Security, respect, stability, these are the foundations of a lasting marriage." She stood, kissing Amira's forehead. "You're just nervous, it's normal. Everything will be fine once you're married." But as her mother left the room, Amira couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be fine again. She moved to her window, drawing aside the curtain to look out at the city. Somewhere out there was a man who had made her question everything she had ever been taught about love and duty in just one brief encounter. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Hassan. An unknown number had sent her a message. Some choices seem impossible until we realize they're the only ones worth making. K. Her heart began to race as she read the words again and again. How had he found her number? More importantly, why did these few words make her feel more alive than all of Hassan's carefully composed messages combined? In his penthouse, Karim set down his phone knowing he had just crossed a line. But the image of Amira's eyes filled with such longing for something more than the life laid out for her haunted him. He had recognized in her the same trapped spirit he had once seen in Sarah, and he had failed to act then. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The next morning dawned with an unusual chill for Marrakesh, as if nature itself sensed the storm brewing in Amira's heart. She had barely slept, the mysterious text message from Karim playing on an endless loop in her mind. As she prepared for her day, every routine action felt weighted with new significance. Each stroke of her hairbrush, each piece of jewelry she fastened, seemed to whisper questions about the path she had chosen. Her phone chirped again, and her heart leaped before she saw it was Hassan. "Looking forward to our lunch today," his message read, followed by a formal emoji. The restaurant he had chosen was exactly what one would expect. Expensive, traditional, proper. Everything in its right place, just like their arranged marriage would be. She typed a polite response, her fingers hovering over the keys before adding a heart emoji, a gesture that felt more like obligation than affection. Across town, Karim sat in his office at the top of the Aziz Tower, ostensibly reviewing business reports, but actually orchestrating a careful plan. His assistant had already provided him with a detailed dossier on Hassan Tazi's business dealings, all legitimate, all successful, all utterly predictable. The man was exactly what he appeared to be, successful, honorable, and completely wrong for a woman like Amira. "You're playing with fire," Sophia announced, striding into his office without knocking. She dropped a society magazine on his desk, open to a page featuring Hassan and Amira at a recent charity event. The photo showed them standing side by side, Hassan's hand properly placed on Amira's elbow, both wearing socially appropriate smiles. "That's a respected engagement you're thinking of disrupting." "Look at her eyes in that picture," Karim challenged, pushing the magazine back toward his cousin. "Really look, Sophia. Tell me you see happiness there." He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. "Besides, since when have you become such a defender of traditional arrangements?" Sophia's reflection in the glass showed her worried frown. "Since I watched you nearly destroy yourself after Sarah, you've never forgiven yourself for—" "This isn't about Sarah," Karim interrupted sharply, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "This is about Amira, about preventing another woman from being trapped in a life she doesn't want." At that moment, Amira sat across from Hassan in the elegant restaurant he had chosen, listening to him discuss the details of their future life together. The crystal chandelier above them cast rainbow patterns across the white tablecloth as he spoke about the house he was having renovated for them, the social obligations they would need to fulfill, the proper way to conduct themselves in their circle. "I've arranged for us to be seated at the governor's table at next week's charity gala," Hassan was saying, his voice measured and precise. "It's important to maintain the right connections." He paused, noticing her distraction. "Amira, is everything all right?" She forced a smile. "Of course, just wedding nerves, I suppose." The words felt hollow in her mouth, but Hassan nodded understanding, reaching across the table to pat her hand in what he clearly thought was a reassuring gesture. "Everything has been properly arranged," he assured her. "Your parents and I have thought of every detail. You have nothing to worry about." His phone buzzed, and he excused himself to take what he called an important business call, leaving Amira alone with her thoughts. She found herself reaching for her own phone, pulling up the message from Karim. Her fingers moved before she could stop them. "How did you get my number?" She pressed send before she could think better of it, her heart racing at her own daring. The response came almost immediately. "I have my ways, but the real question is, why did you keep my message?" The words sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced up to see Hassan still engaged in his call, his back to her as he spoke in quiet, authoritative tones about some business matter. Looking back at her phone, she typed quickly, "I shouldn't be talking to you." "But you are," came the response. "Meet me, 1 hour, the Garden Cafe at La Mamounia, just to talk." Amira's fingers trembled over the keys. Everything she had been taught, everything she had been raised to believe, told her to delete the message and block the number. Instead, she found herself typing, "I can't." Can't? Or won't? Karim's response was immediate. Sometimes the biggest risks carry the greatest rewards. Hassan was returning to the table, slipping his phone into his pocket with a satisfied expression. "Good news about the house renovations," he began, but Amira barely heard him. Her mind was racing, calculating. Their lunch would be over in 20 minutes. La Mamounia was only a 15-minute walk from here. She could make an excuse about meeting her friend Layla for wedding planning. "I have a meeting with Layla after this," she heard herself saying to Hassan, "about the wedding flowers." The lie tasted strange on her tongue, but Hassan merely nodded, already turning the conversation back to his business successes. As she left the restaurant 30 minutes later, Amira felt as though she was standing outside herself, watching. As she turned not toward home, but in the direction of La Mamounia, every step felt both terribly wrong and inexplicably right, leading her toward a moment that would either prove to be the biggest mistake of her life or the first true choice she had ever made for herself. The gardens of La Mamounia were a paradise of carefully cultivated beauty, where ancient olive trees cast dappled shadows across marble pathways, and the air was heavy with the scent of roses and jasmine. Amira's steps slowed as she approached the cafe, her heart thundering in her chest. She had never done anything like this before. Meeting a strange man in secret, deceiving Hassan, risking her family's reputation. Karim was already there, his commanding presence drawing subtle glances from other patrons. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair for her with an old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with his modern appearance. "I wasn't sure you would come," he said softly, his eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I shouldn't have," Amira replied, but made no move to leave. A waiter appeared silently at their table, and Karim ordered mint tea for them both without consulting her, somehow knowing her preference. "Why did you ask me here?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday," he answered with disarming honesty. "Because when I saw you in the Medina, I recognized something in your eyes that I've seen before, the look of someone trapped in a life they never chose." Amira's fingers twisted the napkin in her lap. "You don't know anything about my life," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. The tea arrived, the ritual of pouring providing a brief respite from the tension between them. "I know more than you think," Karim said, his voice dropping lower. "I know that Hassan Tazi is a respected businessman who plans every detail of his life with precision. I know your family has known his for generations. I know that this marriage was arranged when you were still in university, and I know that you've never once been asked what you want." "And what makes you think you know what I want?" Amira challenged, lifting her chin defiantly. But even as she spoke, she felt herself drawn into the magnetic pull of his presence, the way he seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed facades. "Because I see the way your hands shake when you talk about the wedding," he observed quietly. "Because you're here now, even though everything you've been taught tells you not to be. Because when I caught you in the Medina for just a moment, I saw the real you in your eyes, and she's screaming to be free." The truth of his words hit Amira like a physical blow. She took a sip of tea to hide her trembling lips, but Karim reached across the table and gently took the cup from her hands. The brief touch of his fingers against hers sent electricity shooting through her veins. "Tell me about Sarah," she said suddenly, watching as surprise and then pain flickered across his face. "Your cousin mentioned her yesterday. Who was she?" Karim's expression darkened, and for a moment Amira thought he wouldn't answer. "Sarah was someone I failed," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Someone who, like you, was trapped in a life she didn't choose. I recognized the signs but did nothing, convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere, until it was too late. What happened to her? Amira asked softly, but Karim shook his head, his jaw tightening. That's a story for another time, he said firmly. This isn't about Sarah or about me, this is about you, Amira, about the choice you have to make before it's too late. I don't have a choice, she whispered, though the words felt less true with each passing moment. My family, their expectations, the wedding arrangements. There are always choices, Karim interrupted, leaning forward. Sometimes, we just need someone to show us they exist. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table to her. Inside is a key to a suite at the Royal Mansour and a passport in your name. In 3 days, I'm flying to Paris on business. Come with me. Amira stared at the envelope as if it might burst into flames. You're crazy, she breathed, but her hand moved toward it of its own accord. I can't just leave. My family would never forgive me. The scandal would destroy them. Sometimes we have to risk everything to save ourselves, Karim said quietly. The suite is yours whether you decide to use it or not. Think about it, Amira. Think about what you really want, not what everyone else wants for you. A commotion at the entrance to the cafe made them both look up. Amira's heart nearly stopped as she recognized her friend Layla walking in with a group of women, the same Layla she had told Hassan she was meeting. Their eyes met across the garden, and Amira saw the shock and recognition flash across her friend's face. I have to go, Amira said hurriedly, standing so quickly she almost knocked over her tea. Karim rose as well, concern etched on his features. Please don't follow me. As she hurried away through the gardens, the envelope clutched in her handbag felt like it was burning through the leather. Behind her, she could feel Karim's eyes following her retreat and Layla's gaze boring into her back. She had just taken her first step down a dangerous path, and she wasn't sure if she had the courage to turn back or to keep going forward. Amira's hands trembled as she unlocked the door to her family's home, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. The envelope in her bag seemed to carry the weight of all her suppressed desires, all her forbidden dreams. She had barely made it to her room when her phone buzzed with a message from Layla. We need to talk, now. The garden of Amira's home had always been her sanctuary, a place where the gentle splash of the fountain and the rustle of palm fronds could soothe any troubled thoughts. But today, as she sat waiting for Layla, even the familiar comfort of her mother's prized roses couldn't calm her racing heart. Layla arrived like a storm cloud, her traditional kaftan swishing dramatically as she crossed the garden. Have you lost your mind? She hissed, dropping onto the bench beside Amira. Do you have any idea who that was? Karim Aziz isn't just any man. He's notorious in our circles. The things they say about him and his last fiancée. What things? Amira interrupted. Her curiosity piqued despite her anxiety. What happened to his fiancée? Layla's expression softened slightly. No one knows the full story. Sarah was from a good family, much like yours. They were engaged, and then suddenly she was gone. There were rumors. Some say she fled the country, others say she had a breakdown. Whatever happened, Karim was never the same afterward. The information settled like lead in Amira's stomach, mixing with her guilt and confusion. It wasn't what you think, she said weakly. We were just talking. Just talking? Layla arched an eyebrow. In secret? While you're engaged to Hassan? She reached for Amira's hands, squeezing them tightly. Habibi, I'm your friend. I've known you since we were children. This isn't like you sneaking around lying. Maybe that's the problem, Amira whispered, surprising herself with the truth in her words. Maybe I've spent so long being what everyone expects me to be that I don't even know who I really am anymore. And you think Karim Aziz is the one to help you figure that out? Layla's voice was gentle but concerned. A man with his reputation, his past. Before Amira could respond, her phone buzzed again. Hassan's name appeared on the screen, along with a message that made her blood run cold. Just ran into your mother at the mosque. She mentioned you weren't meeting Layla today after all. She's out of town with her family. Care to explain? Oh Allah, Amira breathed, showing the message to Layla. Her friend's face paled. You used me as your excuse? Layla stood, pacing the garden path. This is serious, Amira. Hassan isn't just any man. He's powerful, respected. If he finds out about Karim... He won't, Amira said quickly. But even as she spoke, she felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. The envelope in her bag seemed to pulse with possibility, offering an escape from this mounting pressure. I should go, Layla said finally, her expression troubled. But promise me you won't do anything rash. Promise me you'll think about what you're risking. Your family's reputation, your future, everything we've been raised to value. After Layla left, Amira sat alone in the garden as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the flowering paths. She pulled out the envelope Karim had given her, running her fingers over its smooth surface. Inside was more than just a key and a passport. It was the promise of a different life, one where she made her own choices, followed her own heart. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Hassan, more insistent this time. We need to discuss this. I'm coming over tonight to speak with your parents. Panic rose in Amira's throat as she read the message. The thought of facing Hassan, of trying to explain her deception while maintaining the facade of the perfect bride-to-be, made her feel physically ill. She found herself reaching for her phone again, scrolling to Karim's number. Hassan knows. I lied about meeting Layla, she typed, her fingers shaking. He's coming over tonight. Karim's response was immediate. Use the key. The suite is ready whenever you need it. You don't have to face this alone. As the call to evening prayer echoed across the city, Amira stood in her room staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed different somehow, less certain of the rules that had governed her life, more aware of the possibilities that lay beyond them. In less than an hour, Hassan would arrive, bringing with him all the weight of tradition and expectation. And somewhere across the city, a suite at the Royal Mansour waited, offering sanctuary and the promise of something more than a life lived according to others' expectations. The evening descended upon the Bahri household. Like a gathering storm, Amira's mother bustled around the formal sitting room, arranging cushions and ordering the maid to prepare fresh mint tea, while her father sat in his favorite chair, his expression unreadable. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Amira felt as though she could hardly breathe. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding, her mother suggested, adjusting her hijab nervously. Hassan is a reasonable man. He'll understand that young women sometimes get overwhelmed with wedding preparations, but the worry lines around her eyes betrayed her true concerns. The doorbell's chime echoed through the house like a death knell. Amira's heart leaped into her throat as she heard the maid's footsteps, followed by Hassan's measured tread in the hallway. He entered the room with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect, but there was something cold in his eyes that made Amira shiver. As-salam alaikum, Hassan greeted them formally, accepting the seat offered by Amira's father. He declined the tea with a slight wave of his hand, his attention focused entirely on Amira. I think we need to have an honest discussion about today's events. Hassan, surely this can wait until... Amira's mother began, but Hassan raised, his hand slightly silencing her with the gentle authority he was known for. With all due respect, Aunt Farida, this cannot wait. When I choose a wife, I choose not just for myself, but for my family's honor and reputation. Trust and honesty are paramount. He turned his gaze to Amira, who felt pinned in place like a butterfly in a collection. Would you care to explain where you really were this afternoon? The key to the Royal Mansour suite felt like it was burning a hole in Amira's pocket. She had changed into a conservative dress for the evening, but underneath it, her skin still tingled from where Karim's fingers had brushed against hers. The truth hovered on her lips, demanding to be spoken, but fear held it back. I needed some time alone, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The wedding preparations, the expectations, it's all been overwhelming. Alone? Hassan's voice carried a dangerous edge. Are you certain about that? Because one of my business associates saw you at La Mamounia. He was quite certain you weren't alone. The sharp intake of breath from her mother seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the room. Her father leaned forward in his chair, his fingers gripping the armrests tightly. "Amira," he said, his voice carrying a weight she had never heard. Is this true?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Though she didn't check it, she knew it would be Karim. He had been sending messages throughout the evening, each one a lifeline offering escape from this suffocating situation. The thought of him waiting at the Royal Mansour, ready to whisk her away from all of this, made her heart race. "The truth," Hassan continued, his voice softening in a way that somehow made it more threatening, "is that you were seen with Karim Aziz, a man known for his interference in respectable arrangements, a man with a past that makes him unsuitable for polite society." "You don't know him," Amira found herself saying, the words escaping before she could stop them. The moment they left her lips, she knew she had made a terrible mistake. Hassan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "So you admit it? You've been meeting with him, getting to know him?" He stood, beginning to pace the room. "Do you have any idea what this could do to both our families' reputations? The scandal it could cause?" "Hassan, please," Amira's mother interjected, reaching for his arm. "She's young, she made a mistake, we can handle this quietly." "Quietly?" Hassan turned to face them all, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Like how the Aziz family handled the scandal with Sarah. Should we pretend nothing happened until another young woman disappears into thin air?" The words hung in the air like poison. Amira felt her world tilting on its axis as the implications of Hassan's words sank in. What had really happened to Sarah? What wasn't Karim telling her? Her phone buzzed again, more insistent this time, but she couldn't move to check it. "I think," her father said slowly, rising from his chair, "that perhaps we need to move up the wedding date. Clearly, leaving too much time for preparation has allowed for distractions." Amira's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about family honor, about reputations built over generations, about secrets that seemed to run deeper than she had imagined. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest until she could hardly breathe. In the suffocating silence of her room, Amira finally allowed herself to look at her phone. Multiple messages from Karim filled the screen, each more urgent than the last. The final one made her heart skip. "Whatever Hassan has told you about Sarah isn't the whole truth. Please let me explain. I'm waiting at the Royal Mansour." The house had fallen quiet after Hassan's departure, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Her parents had retreated to their room after announcing that the wedding would take place in 1 week rather than the planned month. The speed with which her carefully structured life was unraveling left her dizzy. Unable to stay still, Amira moved to her window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The Royal Mansour's distinctive silhouette stood out against the night sky, beckoning like a lighthouse in a storm. The key in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Amira," her mother's voice called softly. "Can we talk, Habibti?" Quickly hiding her phone, Amira opened the door to find her mother, looking more fragile than she had ever seen her. Gone was the perfectly composed matriarch, replaced by a woman worn down by worry. She entered the room and sat on the edge of Amira's bed, patting the space beside her. "When I was your age," her mother began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I too had doubts about my arranged marriage to your father." She smoothed her kaftan with trembling hands. "There was another man, a teacher at my university. He made me feel things I had never felt before, made me question everything I had been taught." Amira sat beside her mother, stunned by this unexpected confession. "What happened?" "I chose duty, family, honor," her mother replied, a hint of something, regret, coloring her voice. "And in time I found happiness in that choice. Your father is a good man, just as Hassan is a good man." She turned to face Amira, taking her hands. "But watching you today, seeing the look in your eyes, it reminded me of myself, all those years ago." "Mama," Amira began, but her mother squeezed her hands, silencing her. "Listen to me carefully, Habibti. The choices we make in moments of passion can haunt us forever. Hassan is right about Karim Aziz. There are rumors, whispers about what happened to Sarah. Some say, she hesitated, then continued in an even lower voice. Some say she discovered something about him, something dark, and when she threatened to expose him, she disappeared. The words sent a chill down Amira's spine, but somehow they didn't align with the man she had come to know. The gentleness in Karim's eyes when he spoke of Sarah, the pain in his voice, those couldn't be faked, could they? The wedding arrangements will be accelerated, her mother continued. Your father has already called the imam. In 1 week, you will be Hassan's wife, and all of this will be behind us. She stood, kissing Amira's forehead. Sometimes, the safest path is the right one. After her mother left, Amira sat in the growing darkness, her mind racing. The key to the Royal Mansour seemed to pulse in her pocket, a testament to the choice that lay before her. Her phone lit up again with a message from Karim. I know you're scared. I know you've heard things about Sarah. But please give me a chance to explain. Some truths are more complicated than they appear. With trembling fingers, Amira began to pack a small bag, just essentials, things that wouldn't be missed immediately. The weight of generations of tradition and expectation pressed down on her, but for the first time in her life, she felt something stronger pushing back. The desire to know the truth, to make her own choices, to live her own life. The house had grown silent, her parents presumably asleep. The night air carried the distant sounds of the city, car horns, music from late-night cafes, the last call to prayer echoing across the rooftops. Amira stood in her doorway looking back at her room one last time. The wedding dress hung in its garment bag like a ghost of the future that had been planned for her. On her desk lay the endless lists of wedding preparations, now meaningless in the face of what she was about to do. Her phone buzzed one final time. The night manager has been instructed to expect you, Karim's message read. Whatever you decide after hearing the truth about Sarah, I promise you will always have a choice. Taking a deep breath, Amira shouldered her bag and moved silently toward the stairs. Each step felt like a decision, each moment bringing her closer to a point of no return. The truth about Sarah, about Karim, about her own heart, it all waited for her at the Royal Mansour. The only question was whether she had the courage to face it. The Royal Mansour stood like a palace from ancient tales, its intricate architecture illuminated by countless lights that made it glow against the night sky. Amira's heart pounded as she approached the discreet side entrance Karim had mentioned in his message. The night manager, true to Karim's word, was expecting her. With a respectful nod, he led her through marble corridors adorned with traditional Moroccan craftsmanship, each step echoing with the weight of her decision. The suite, when she reached it, took her breath away. It was more like a private riad than a hotel room, complete with its own courtyard and fountain. The sound of running water provided a soothing counterpoint to her racing thoughts. Karim stood by the window, his silhouette carved against the city lights. He turned as she entered, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying both relief and concern. "I wasn't sure you would after what Hassan told you." "Tell me about Sarah," Amira demanded, remaining near the door. "Tell me the truth, all of it." Karim moved to a beautifully appointed sitting area, gesturing for her to join him. When she hesitated, he smiled sadly. "You're afraid of me now, aren't you? Because of what they've said?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that spoke of deep weariness. "Sit, please. You deserve to know everything." Slowly, Amira moved to take a seat across from him, keeping the coffee table between them like a barrier. The fountain's gentle music filled the silence as Karim gathered his thoughts. "Sarah was like you in many ways," he began, his voice soft with memory. "Trapped in an arrangement she didn't choose, desperate for a way out. But unlike you, she didn't have the courage to be honest about her feelings. Instead, she tried to please everyone, her family, her fiancé, me." He stood, moving to a cabinet and returning with a leather portfolio. "What nobody knew, what?" I didn't discover until it was too late, was that Sarah was struggling with severe depression. She hid it well, maintaining the perfect facade her family expected. But inside, he opened the portfolio, removing a series of letters. These are what she left behind. Amira took the letters with trembling hands. They were written in elegant English, the handwriting becoming increasingly erratic as she progressed through them. The final letter made her gasp softly. "She didn't disappear," Karim continued, his voice rough with emotion. "She had a breakdown when she couldn't maintain the perfect image anymore. When the pressure became too much, she checked herself into a private clinic in Switzerland. Her family covered it up, spread rumors about her disappearance rather than face the shame of admitting their daughter needed help." "But why didn't you tell anyone?" Amira asked, looking up from the letters. "Why let people think—" "Because it wasn't my story to tell," he interrupted gently. "Sarah's recovery was private, her journey her own. I respected her wish for privacy, even at the cost of my own reputation." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But watching you today, seeing the same signs of someone drowning under the weight of expectations, I couldn't stay silent again." Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight. Amira realized she had been holding her breath, released it slowly. "Where is she now?" she asked softly. "Living in Paris," Karim replied with a small smile. "She's an artist now, finally free to be herself. She sends me her gallery showings sometimes." He reached for his phone, showing Amira a website featuring vibrant abstract paintings. She found her truth, her path, but it took nearly losing herself completely to find the courage to choose it. "And your cousin?" Amira asked, remembering Sophia's concerned warnings. "What's her role in all this?" Karim's expression tightened. "Slightly. Sophia, she means well, but she's part of the same world that nearly destroyed Sarah. She believes in maintaining appearances at all costs. She was the one who helped Sarah's family cover up the truth, thinking she was protecting everyone involved." The weight of these revelations settled over Amira like a heavy cloak. Everything she had been told, everything she had feared about Karim, was being transformed in the light of truth. But new fears were taking their place, fears about her own strength, her own courage to face the truth about her life. "Why did you really bring me here?" she asked, finally voicing the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why risk everything to help me?" Karim moved then, crossing the space between them to kneel before her chair. His proximity made her heart race, but she didn't pull away. "Because from the moment I saw you in the Medina, I recognized a kindred spirit, someone brave enough to question the life others had chosen for them, someone strong enough to make their own choices, if only they were given the chance." He took her hands in his, and this time she didn't resist. "I'm not offering you an escape, Amira. I'm offering you a choice. Stay here tonight. Think about what you really want. Tomorrow, if you choose to return to Hassan, to the life your family has planned, I'll respect that decision. But if you choose another path—" The unfinished sentence hung in the air between them, filled with possibility and promise. Through the suite's windows, the lights of Marrakesh twinkled like stars fallen to earth, each one representing a different, possible future. Amira looked down at their joined hands, feeling the strength and gentleness in his touch, and realized she was standing on the edge of a decision that would change her life forever. Dawn was breaking over Marrakesh when Amira finally stirred from the comfortable chair where she had spent hours talking with Karim. Their conversation had flowed like water, moving from Sarah's story to their own lives, dreams, and fears. The morning light filtered through the intricate mashrabiyah screens, casting delicate patterns across the floor and illuminating them both in its gentle glow. "I should go," Amira said softly, though she made no move to leave. "My parents will be waking up soon. They'll notice I'm gone." The thought of returning home, of facing the consequences of her midnight escape, made her stomach tighten with anxiety. Karim, who had moved to the window to watch the sunrise, turned to face her. The golden light softened his features, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "You don't have to go back," he said quietly. "The choice is yours, remember?" Before Amira could respond, a sharp knock at the suite's door made them both freeze. Karim moved quickly to answer it, his body tension betraying his concern. When he opened the door, Sophia burst in, her usual elegant composure replaced by obvious agitation. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded, stopping short when she saw Amira. Her eyes widened, taking in Amira's rumpled clothes and the obvious signs that she had spent the night talking rather than sleeping. "Oh, this is even worse than I thought." "Sophia," Karim began, his voice carrying a warning edge, but his cousin cut him off. "No, you need to hear this," she insisted, pulling out her phone. "Hassan isn't just angry, he's furious. He's called an emergency meeting with both families for this morning. He's threatening to expose everything about Sarah, to twist the truth in ways that will destroy not just your reputation, but Sarah's privacy as well." Amira felt the blood drain from her face. "He can't do that," she whispered. "The truth," Sophia laughed bitterly. "In our world, the truth is whatever people choose to believe. Hassan has influence, connections. He can make people believe whatever version of events he wants them to believe." Karim moved to stand between Sophia and Amira, his protective instinct obvious. "Then we'll tell our own truth. Sarah can speak for herself now. She's stronger. She's rebuilt her life." "You would drag her back into this?" Sophia challenged. "Force her to relive everything she went through, just to protect your reputation?" She turned to Amira, her expression softening slightly. "And what about your family? Are you prepared for what this scandal will do to them?" The weight of responsibility settled over Amira like a heavy cloak. She thought of her mother's confession the night before, of the choice she had made between duty and desire. She thought of her father's proud face, of the way he had always supported her education and dreams, even within the boundaries of tradition. "There has to be another way," she said, looking between Karim and Sophia. "Some way to resolve this without destroying everything and everyone we care about." Karim moved to her side, taking her hand in his. The gesture was both comforting and electrifying, making her heart race despite the gravity of their situation. "Whatever you decide," he said softly, "I'm with you. We can face this together." Sophia watched their interaction with growing concern. "I don't have much time," she warned. "The families are meeting in 2 hours. Hassan is demanding answers, and he's not in a mood to be patient." The morning sun had fully risen now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed to mock the darkness of their situation. Amira stood, moving to the window to look out over the awakening city. Below, people were beginning their days, unaware of the drama unfolding in the luxury suite above them. "I need to make a phone call," she said suddenly, turning back to face Karim and Sophia. "There's someone else who needs to be part of this conversation." "Who?" Sophia asked, but Karim's eyes widened with understanding. "Sarah," he said quietly. "You want to talk to Sarah?" Amira nodded, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "If we're going to fight for the truth, we need to understand all of it. And Sarah deserves to have a say in how her story is told." Karim pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. "Are you sure about this? Involving Sarah means there's no going back. Whatever happens next will change everything." "Everything has already changed," Amira replied, thinking of how different she felt from the obedient daughter who had walked through the Medina just days ago. "The question now is whether we let others control the narrative of our lives, or whether we have the courage to tell our own stories." The sound of the morning call to prayer drifted through the window, its familiar melody carrying both comfort and urgency. They had less than 2 hours to prevent their world from unraveling, to find a way to honor both tradition and truth, to fight for the right to choose their own paths without destroying the people they loved in the process. The video call connected with a soft chime, and Sarah's face appeared on the screen. The woman who looked back at them had an artist's penetrating gaze and a quiet confidence that spoke of hard-won inner peace. Paint stains marked her silk blouse, evidence of a morning spent in her Paris studio. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the scene before her. Karim, Amira, and Sophia gathered around the phone in the luxurious suite. "When you said it was urgent, I didn't expect this," Sarah said, her voice carrying a slight French accent now. She studied Amira's face intently. "You must be the one Karim mentioned in his emails, the one who reminds him of me." "I'm sorry to disturb you," Amira began, but Sarah waved away her apology with an elegant gesture. "Don't apologize. Sometimes the past needs to be disturbed, needs to be brought into the light." She leaned closer to the camera, her expression serious. "Sophia has explained the situation. Hassan is threatening to expose my story, to twist it into something ugly. But he forgets one thing. It's my story to tell, not his." Karim moved closer to the screen, his shoulder brushing against Amira's. "We won't let him use you like this, Sarah. We can find another way." A sad smile crossed Sarah's face. "Always the protector, Karim. But I don't need protection anymore. What I needed, what I still need, is understanding. The same understanding I see in Amira's eyes right now." The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly forward as Sarah began to speak, sharing her story in her own words. She talked about the pressure that had nearly broken her, the shame of not being able to meet impossible expectations, the fear of disappointing everyone she loved. Her voice grew stronger as she described her journey to healing, the courage it had taken to choose her own path. "The worst part wasn't the breakdown," Sarah said, her eyes distant with memory. "It was the silence afterward, the way everyone tried to pretend I had simply vanished, as if that was somehow less shameful than admitting I needed help. That silence nearly destroyed me, and it's destroying others like me, others like you, Amira." Amira felt tears sliding down her cheeks, recognition and understanding flooding through her. "But how do we break that silence without breaking our families?" Sarah's expression softened. "By showing them that strength doesn't always mean following tradition. Sometimes it means having the courage to forge a new path, to speak truth to power, to stand up and say, 'This is who I am, and I deserve to be heard.'" A commotion in the phi. Hallway outside the suite made them all tense. Sophia moved to the door, listening intently. "They're gathering downstairs," she reported. "Both families. Hassan is with them." "Then it's time," Sarah said firmly. "Amira, are you ready to tell your truth?" Amira looked at Karim, finding strength in his steady gaze, then back at Sarah. "I'm ready. But I need your help, all of you." "What I'm thinking, it's either brilliantly brave or completely crazy." A spark of interest lit Sarah's eyes. "Those are often the same thing. Tell me your plan." As Amira outlined her idea, she saw hope and determination replace the worry on her companions' faces. It was audacious, unprecedented in their conservative society, but it just might work. It would require perfect timing, unwavering courage, and the kind of love that was strong enough to bridge the gap between tradition and truth. "I'll be on the next flight to Marrakesh," Sarah announced when Amira finished speaking. "Some stories need to be told in person, and some battles need to be fought face to face." "But your exhibition," Karim protested, knowing how important her work was to her. Sarah laughed, a sound full of life and freedom. "Art can wait. This is more important. This is about breaking the cycle of silence, about showing that there's strength in vulnerability, power in choosing one's own path." The sun had fully risen, over Marrakesh now, bathing the city in golden light. In less than an hour they would face their families, Hassan and generations of tradition. But as Amira looked around at her unlikely allies, the woman who had blazed the trail before her, the man who had given her the courage to choose, and even Sophia, who was beginning to understand that sometimes protecting people meant letting them fight their own battles, she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. "Whatever happens next," Sarah said softly, "remember this moment. Remember that you're not alone, that your story deserves to be told, that love, real love, gives us the courage to be ourselves." Karim reached for Amira's hand, interlacing their fingers. The gesture was both a promise and a question, offering support while leaving the choice entirely in her hands. In that touch, Amira felt the future she had always dreamed of but never dared to reach for. A future where love and duty could coexist, where tradition could bend without breaking, where her voice could finally be heard. The grand meeting room of the Royal Mansour hummed with tension as both families gathered, their whispered conversations echoing off the ornate walls. Hassan stood near the window, his usual composure marked by an edge of barely contained anger. Amira's parents sat close together, her mother's fingers worrying her prayer beads, her father's face set in stern lines of disappointment and concern. Karim's family occupied the other side of the room, their wealth and influence evident in their bearing but tempered by the gravity of the situation. Sophia moved between the groups, trying to maintain a semblance of calm as they waited for Amira and Karim to appear. When the double doors finally opened, all conversation ceased. Amira entered first, her head held high despite the night's lack of sleep. She had changed into a traditional kaftan, but there was nothing traditional about the determination in her stride. Karim followed, maintaining a respectful distance, but his presence clearly supportive. "So," Hassan spoke first, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "you finally decided to face the consequences of your actions." "No, Hassan," Amira replied, her voice steady and clear. "I've decided to face the truth, all of it, including the truth about Sarah." The name sent ripples of reaction through the room. Hassan's face darkened. "You dare to mention—" "Yes, I dare," Amira interrupted, moving to the center of the room, "because her story is part of this story, and it's time for all of us to stop hiding behind comfortable lies and half-truths." "Amira," her father's voice carried a warning, "you don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly, Baba." She turned to face him, her eyes softening with love, despite her firm tone. "I understand that we've all been trapped by traditions that value appearances over truth, silence over healing, conformity over happiness." The sound of heels clicking on marble made everyone turn. There, in the doorway, stood Sarah, exactly as she had promised. Her presence was like a shockwave through the room. She had transformed from the paint-stained artist of their morning call into an elegant woman whose very bearing commanded attention. Hassan took an involuntary step backward. "Sarah," Karim's mother breathed, her hand flying to her throat. "How—" "I came because it's time," Sarah said, moving to stand beside Amira. "Time to end the silence that nearly destroyed me, the same silence that threatens to destroy Amira now." Hassan recovered quickly, his face hardening. "This is a private family matter. You have no place here." "On the contrary," Sarah's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable strength. "I have every right to be here, because you've made my story a weapon. But you forgot something crucial. It's my story to tell, not yours." Amira's mother had risen from her seat, her prayer beads forgotten in her lap. "What is this? What truth are you talking about?" Sarah moved forward, her artist's hands graceful as she gestured. "The truth about what happens when we force people into boxes they weren't meant to fit in. The truth about how our community's silence around mental health, around personal choice, around the right to choose one's own path, is causing more harm than any scandal ever could." "When I had my breakdown," she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "everyone found it easier to pretend I had simply disappeared. My family, my friends, even my fiancé. Everyone chose silence over truth. But that silence only perpetuated the cycle of shame and suffering." Amira stepped forward, taking Sarah's hand in solidarity. "I won't disappear," she declared, looking directly at Hassan. "I won't be silenced, and I won't let you use Sarah's story as a weapon to force me into a marriage without love." "Love?" Hassan scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You would throw away everything, family honor, tradition, security, for some romantic notion of love?" "Not just for love," Amira replied, her voice growing stronger. "For the right to choose my own path, for the courage to be honest about who I am and what I want, for the chance to show that tradition and personal truth don't have to be enemies." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. In that moment of silence, the door opened once more. An elderly man entered, his traditional dress and bearing, marking him as someone of great importance. Everyone in the room straightened instinctively. "Sheikh Abdullah," Hassan breathed, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect—" "No, you didn't," the sheikh said quietly, his wise eyes taking in the scene before him. "But Amira did. She called me this morning, asking me to hear a story of truth, love, and the courage to bridge the gap between tradition and personal choice. He moved to the center of the room, standing between the divided families. "I have come to listen," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of generations of wisdom. "And I suggest you all do the same, because sometimes the greatest respect we can show to tradition is to help it grow, to help it embrace the truths of the heart without losing its essential values." Sheikh Abdullah settled into the ornate chair provided for him, his presence bringing a sense of gravitas to the charged atmosphere. The morning light streaming through the windows created a halo around his distinguished figure as he gestured for everyone to be seated. The two families arranged themselves in a semicircle before him, with Amira, Karim, and Sarah remaining standing. At the center, "In my many years as a spiritual leader," the Sheikh began, his voice gentle yet commanding, "I have seen our community struggle with the balance between preserving our precious traditions and adapting to the changing world. Today we face this challenge again, but with an opportunity to show true wisdom." He turned his penetrating gaze to Hassan. "Young man, you speak of honor and tradition. These are indeed valuable things. But tell me, what honor is there in forcing a heart to beat against its natural rhythm? What tradition is served by burying truth beneath layers of silence?" Hassan shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence wavering under the Sheikh's scrutiny. "Our traditions have sustained our community for generations," he argued, though with less conviction than before. "Without them, what remains? What remains is the essence of what those traditions were meant to protect," the Sheikh replied, gesturing towards Sarah. "Please, my dear, share your story with us. Not the version others have told, but your truth." Sarah stepped forward, her artist soul evident in the grace of her movements. "I was like Amira once," she began, her voice clear and strong. "A dutiful daughter, engaged to a man chosen by my family, believing that submission to others' wishes was the same as honor. That silence was the same as strength." She paused, looking around the room, meeting each person's gaze. "But silence became a prison, and duty became a chain around my neck, growing heavier until I could no longer breathe. When I finally broke, when I sought help for my depression, my family's first concern was not my healing but what people would say." Amira's mother made a small sound of distress, recognizing perhaps some echo of her own untold stories in Sarah's words. The Sheikh nodded encouragingly, prompting Sarah to continue. "I found healing not in silence but in speaking truth, not in conformity, but in discovering who I really was. The art that now brings me recognition and joy would never have emerged if I had remained in that gilded cage of expectations." The Sheikh turned to Karim. "And you, son, what did you learn from this experience?" Karim stepped forward, his shoulder brushing against Amira's in a gesture of subtle support. "I learned that true strength lies not in protecting people from their choices, but in supporting them as they make their own path. I watched Sarah suffer in silence, and my own silence made me complicit in her pain. When I met Amira, I recognized the same struggle, but this time I chose to speak, to act, to offer a choice rather than impose a solution." "Ah," the Sheikh smiled slightly, "and therein lies the wisdom we seek. The choice." He turned to Amira's parents. "Your daughter stands before you not in rebellion but in truth. She honors you not through blind obedience, but through the courage to be honest about her heart's calling." Amira's father stirred, his stern expression softening slightly. "But what of our responsibilities, our obligations to community and tradition?" "The greatest responsibility," the Sheikh replied, "is to nurture the souls Allah has entrusted to our care, to help them grow strong and true, like plants reaching for the sun." He gestured to the intricate Islamic geometric patterns decorating the room's walls. "Look at these designs. Their beauty lies not in rigid repetition, but in how they adapt and flow while maintaining their essential character. So too must our traditions adapt and flow." He stood then, moving to where Amira and Karim stood together. "I see before me two souls drawn together, not by arrangement or obligation, but by a deeper understanding. Their love honors our traditions by seeking to transform them, not destroy them. By speaking truth instead of hiding in silence. By choosing to face challenges together instead of suffering alone. Turning to face the assembled families, the Sheikh's voice took on a more formal tone. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us that marriage must be entered into with free consent, with open hearts, with truth. Hassan, he addressed the man directly, your anger comes from wounded pride, not from love. Release this engagement with honor, and Allah will guide you to a partner whose heart beats in rhythm with your own. The tension in the room began to shift, like ice breaking up on a river in spring. Amira's mother wiped tears from her eyes as her father sat straighter, a new understanding dawning in his expression. Even Hassan's rigid posture began to soften, the wisdom of the Sheikh's words penetrating his defensive armor. There is a way forward, the Sheikh concluded, that honors both our traditions and our hearts, but it requires courage from all of us. Courage to speak truth, courage to listen, courage to allow love to guide us toward a future that embraces both the wisdom of the past and the promise of tomorrow. In that moment, as the morning sun filled the room with golden light, something profound shifted in the atmosphere. The divide between tradition and personal truth, between duty and desire, began to blur and transform, suggesting the possibility of a new way forward that would honor them all. 6 months later, the gardens of the Royal Mansour bloomed with thousands of roses, their perfume filling the air with the sweet scent of new beginnings. The same room that had witnessed such intense confrontation now sparkled with celebration, as guests gathered for a wedding, unlike any Marrakesh had seen before. Amira stood before a mirror in her preparation suite, her wedding dress a masterful blend of traditional craftsmanship and contemporary design, much like the ceremony itself would be. Sarah, now her closest friend and confidant, adjusted the delicate veil with an artist's precision. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked, meeting Amira's eyes in the mirror. "Strangely, no," Amira replied with a serene smile. "For the first time in my life, everything feels exactly right." The door opened to admit Amira's mother, who paused at the sight of her daughter. Tears glimmered in her eyes as she approached, carrying a small wooden box. "I have something for you," she said softly, opening the box to reveal a stunning antique necklace. "This belonged to your grandmother and her grandmother before her, but unlike my generation, you have chosen to wear it with both freedom and honor in your heart." As her mother fastened the necklace, Amira remembered the journey of the past 6 months. After the Sheikh's intervention, everything had changed. Hassan, touched by the wisdom of the Sheikh's words, had released her from their engagement with unexpected grace. More surprisingly, he had become an advocate for change within their community, working with Sarah to establish support groups for young people struggling with the weight of expectations. Sophia entered the room next, carrying a bouquet of roses, in shades of cream and blush. "The guests are arriving," she announced, her own smile reflecting how far they had all come. "And Karim is practically wearing a path in the floor with his pacing." In another part of the hotel, Karim stood with his father and the Sheikh, receiving early guests. The elderly spiritual leader had become a mentor to both Karim and Amira, helping them design a ceremony that would honor tradition while embracing change. Under his guidance, they had created something new, a bridge between past and future. The wedding space itself reflected this bridge. Traditional Moroccan lanterns cast their warm glow alongside modern lighting installations. Ancient calligraphy adorned walls where Sarah's contemporary paintings also hung. The guest list included both conservative community elders and young progressives, all gathered to witness something extraordinary. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant golds and purples, the ceremony began. Sheikh Abdullah presided, his wise presence lending gravity and grace to the proceedings. But unlike traditional ceremonies, both families participated equally. Amira and Karim had written their own vows, blending traditional promises with personal truths. "I choose you," Karim said, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering, "not because tradition demands it, but because my heart recognizes its home in you. I promise to support your dreams, to honor your truth, and to walk beside you as we create our own path forward." Amira's response carried the same blend of respect and revolution. "I choose you freely, with both my heart and mind in agreement. I promise to honor our heritage while embracing our future, to speak truth with courage, and to love you with the freedom that comes from choosing one's own destiny." The sheikh smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife, adding words that would be long remembered. "May your union be a testament to the power of love to transform tradition, not by breaking it, but by helping it grow. May your courage inspire others to seek truth in their own hearts, and may your story remind us that the greatest traditions are those that have the wisdom to embrace change." The celebration that followed was as unique as the ceremony itself. Traditional Moroccan musicians played alongside contemporary artists. Guests from different generations and mindsets mingled, sharing stories and perspectives. Sarah's paintings, specially created for the occasion, captured the essence of their journey, the delicate balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. As the evening progressed, Amira found a quiet moment with her father in the garden. "Are you happy, Baba?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his eyes wise and gentle. "I am proud," he replied. "Proud that my daughter had the courage to teach an old man about the true meaning of honor. Your mother and I, we are learning from you just as you learned from us." Later, as Amira and Karim shared their first dance, she caught sight of Sarah speaking animatedly with Hassan. The two had formed an unexpected friendship, working together to create support systems for young people in their community. Their collaboration had already helped several families navigate the delicate balance between tradition and personal truth. The night air was filled with music, laughter, and the sense of witnessing something profound. Not just a wedding, but the birth of a new way of honoring old traditions while embracing new truths. As Karim held her close, Amira remembered that moment in the Medina where their story began, how a simple stumble had led to such an extraordinary journey. "What are you thinking?" Karim whispered in her ear as they danced. "I'm thinking about choices," she replied, smiling up at him. "About how the courage to choose our own path doesn't mean abandoning where we came from, but finding new ways to honor it." Above them, the stars of Marrakesh twinkled like diamonds scattered across velvet, witnessing a love story that had become so much more, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of truth, and a reminder that the greatest traditions are those that have the wisdom to embrace change while keeping their heart intact. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope this journey of love, courage, and transformation has touched your hearts. Amira and Karim's story reminds us that true love has the power to bridge worlds and transform traditions without breaking them. For more captivating stories that explore the delicate balance between heart and heritage, tradition and truth, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button below. We've prepared a special playlist of similar stories that celebrate the courage to choose one's own path while honoring our roots. Find it by clicking to your left. Join our community in the comments section and share your thoughts on this modern tale of love and wisdom. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life's most profound moments. Don't miss our upcoming content. Your next favorite story awaits.